And our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. Do we have anyone that would like to make public comments? Well, he's coming up. Can you do a test for us, Mayor Benetti?
Can you hear me? Darn.
Okay,
I can
go
hear
ahead,
you.
Mike.
Good evening, Mike Howard from Main Street. And just a little insight. You know, I'm sort of getting to be a YouTube. Watch certain ones on there. And I wanted to share with you guys what I find very inspirational. So these guys do some good stuff. And I'm giving you a list of the YouTube channels I watch at night. And they all seem pretty good, you know, right along the line of what I'm thinking. And so I gave a little sheet out for anybody who want to go home and look at the computers and check them out 1 or 2 times. They come up with some good ones and show you a lot of global improvement. You know, like this Ray Delahanty, he used to be a city down, I think, in Portland. And he's got a channel called City Nerd. And he discusses a lot about, you know, what's going on in cities. And then not just bikes, he's a Canadian root of the Netherlands, and he's done some tremendous work on that. And the third one is an organization called Strong Towns, which has been around for a while. They, you know, like I said, they get a home policy. But anyway, that's just wanted to share it with you guys in case you don't have a little look on your TV, so you know, whatever. Thank you.
And did you share a copy of this with the city manager?
I'm not sure. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so that the other counselors online can.
Sounds good. Yeah,
all right.
thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further public comments? Dee?
Thank you, guys. Dean Lundy, a rabble rouser from the Empire district there. Last time I was here, I thought, oh, they're going to think I'm crazy about tearing down the overhead freeways and ripping up the railroad tracks, and instead of turning our back on this fabulous river, actually, you know, it's not that crazy, because that guy, not just bikes, that you have that link to, they have examples of South Korea had a freeway that we talked about over the city. It's horrible under there. They have pictures of it. They tore it down and built a stream down through the middle. Well, I might, but anyway, car-centric cars, you know, there's tons of cars. Every single example that I've looked at where they've reduced a lane of traffic and slowed the city down and opened it up to public use has just made a city blossom, you know, and I think tourism is worth it. For economic development, I think this is tourism, you know, nature, tourism, art, you know, the city. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dean. Do we have other public comments? No comments that came in? Just those 2 gentlemen who were at the podium there. Thank you very much. All right, our next item on the agenda is a review of upcoming city council and URA board action items, which is the city of Coos Bay and Coos County shared urban growth boundary work. And Chelsea, you want to give us kind of an overview?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. So thank you, County Board Commissioner, for joining us here. The urban growth boundary, looking at urban growth boundary, is something that we talked about months ago. Maybe we have agreements in place that talk about how the city and county manage their areas. It doesn't fit in this law about urban growth boundary. So working with the state Department of Land Conservation and Development, we got a pathway forward on how we're cleaning up these the agreements and these areas and get to where the area research has been done. And then effectively what this process does is it needs to problem solving process. This work today is getting us to a point where we know what was the agreement that sets this and scope of work the pathway forward. So that's kind of where we're at in the process. Jay will talk to you about the problem solving, the statement, the problem solving statement, and finding the documents on the goals that are listed and the areas that we want to look at. We want to look at one area of the question, we want to look at them all, we want to do some as evaluation for some evaluation as urban reserve. There's some differences in how we treat them. So our agreements with areas of life, how things are today, and to prepare for the future. We know that as a potential for small projects, we want to be ahead of the game when it comes to housing. So that's part of it. So tonight, Jay, our consultant, is going to come up, get a presentation. Yeah, and there. We had the joint city county plan commission meeting on the 13th, so just about 2 weeks ago, they heard the same information, and after that, they came up, they concurred, have a consensus that they would recommend to these bodies that we would move forward for considering the Charleston Bar area and the Bunker Hill State Park areas for evaluation, and then the other area is Libby, Millington, Boston Gulch, and then there's an R2 opportunity area. We would evaluate those for urban reserve, and so there would be 2 different buckets that we treated differently. So just letting you know that was their recommendation, how we should proceed. And Jake, you want to add more on the way?
No, I think that's right. I think a couple things I'd like to say is one, I just really like to thank the project advisory committee. They asked a lot of good questions, and attendance was pretty good throughout. And these sort of things aren't the most glamorous sorts of activities to request somebody to come and sit in on, and it's always a testament to small town. It seems like people always step up and want help and want their community to be a better place, and that was definitely the environment. So I just want to thank them for that, and also thank all the planning commissioners that showed up for the joint work session, asked some really good questions, and they were 100% tracking. So that's for something as complicated as this. Like, I would say it's pretty impressive, and just a really good group. So
is this your?
That's not mine.
Two, yes, comprehensive land use plan, go 14 should have enough land for that land.
The other thing I would say too is it sounds like the people online
Yeah, we're working on that.
are muted, but the mayor did participate in the project advice, so he already had his chance of looking through my cases for an hour and a half at that meeting. So I'm sure if they get it fixed again, they'll have a couple more things he wants to weigh in on.
Seriously. This is like the meeting, the firestorm. Do you have it loaded on yours?
Well, I can definitely say that I am of no help with electronics today. I went into work and my computer wouldn't even come on, so. I know.
I was saying it's not as much fun as when the engineers came here, but that's
Sounds
like
I know, right?
you have a degree in math, but you can't get the thing to do what you want to.
laptop lost internet 2 or 3 times before 10 this morning.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I didn't have internet either. But-
Mine stopped registering that it even has a port.
I
oh,
think-
that's not
I
good.
think your computer
The
and my
screen is
computer.
worse, but you have no ports, it's not a good sign.
You just forgot it has an Ethernet port with a cord in it.
Probably picked up from the meeting.
This is a good sign because the next step for me was singing, and that's always a bad thing.
I could run home.
Was
and
it
get a
like in
guitar.
the table?
Oh,
How many do you have?
Only one. Can't play it, but you know, I got it.
tap dance.
It's not a bad.
All right.
Didn't build back some dexterity.
The
Never
floor
know
is
when you might
yours.
catch an inspiration and then
Yeah.
you're off.
Thank you, Counselor. So we already did introduction staff and council. My name is Jay Harlan with CSA Planning, and like I said, I'm the consultant for the project. Your packet, I realize was sort of heavy. I don't necessarily expect everyone to have read every single word, unless you have real bout of insomnia. You need to get some sleep, but I'm not gonna go through all that stuff sort of line by line, but I just want to kind of give an overview of the 3 pieces. The type memo 3 has kind of a bunch of apps in it. That's that one we were looking at what are the areas we're talking about, what's going on with those areas, how developed are they currently, what's the zoning in those areas and things like that. So it's a kind of high level flyover of looking at that from the perspective of what's called goal 14, which is the urbanization goal for the city. And then the 4th tech memo, that's on that we really kind of dug into the foundation for an RPS project. So regional problem solving process is essentially no matter what, it's the county and then any number of other participants depending on the nature of the problem, right? So the only one other of these done in the state that one had Jackson County, where I live, and 6 participants. Well, Jacksonville, and then they both Ripcord and failed on the other 6 cities about 2 months before it was supposed to really start. But at any rate, the regional problem solving statute requires that the county and the participating jurisdictions all sign on to an agreement to essentially do the planning work. That's the way that it works. So first the city and county do everything, send it up to the state reviews the agreement and also the information that goes with it to decide whether or not they want to, essentially allow jurisdictions to do the regional problem solving project. What the regional problem solving do, it lets you essentially, you can flex some of the rules. Now the outcomes still need to comply with the goals on goals, statewide planning goals, and you have to comply with all the statutes. So you don't need to flex statutes because that's the law. And the goals are in Coos Bay area, it's the 14 statewide planning goals that apply everywhere in Oregon, plus goal 16, which is the estuary area, which I think you're all familiar with some of the estuary planning. So so that's the tech memo 4 really gets into details of sort of what's unique about the situation in Coos Bay as it relates to the current configuration of the urban growth boundary land uses that are in the city of Coos Bay. That's really what tech memo 4 does. And then tech memo 5 is a draft RPS work plan. So if county and city are in agreement to initiate an RPS project, reach agreement against the state says, yeah, looks good, go ahead and do it. This is CSA sort of drafted, okay, these are the things that would be involved with implementing that agreement to get to the outcomes that are set forth in the agreement. So the draft problem statement that's in tech memo 3, and there's essentially 4 basic problems. One is a population problem, which is in most of the communities around the state, areas like Barview and Charleston and Bunker Hill, when the original UGBs were set up, those areas were included in the urban growth boundaries. And Coos County, Coos Bay, sort of did it and sort of didn't do it. And then later on in kind of the late 90s and early 2000s, both city and the county then took very specific actions that said, no, we didn't do that. They're not in the urban growth boundary. So for the rest of the state, sort of as the state's land use planning programs evolve, the general assumption is these areas are already in UGBs. Then if you want to add one day to your UGB, it's going to be based upon a population forecast where generally you have growth that's forecast, and then you analyze the growth that Portland State University Population Research Center forecasts for that UGB. And there's nothing really in the way that's done that accounts for transferring the population, right? So depending on what areas might be within an RPS project and ultimately get included in the UGB, when we look at the Charleston and Bardeview and Bunker Hill areas, like, and then some of those other areas, like it's like 6,500 people, I think, ish, in round numbers, I think. So there's just not a process to go, okay, what if these people are outside the UGB now and inside the UGB later? They go from the county population rural forecast to the city's forecast, but there wasn't really growth. It was just moving the line on map and changing the accounting, right? So there's just sort of nothing in the population forecast process that captures that. So that translates then into land need problem, which is under the normal UGB process. The land need problem is based upon, the land need is based upon the sort of the amount of population that cannot be accommodated for employment and for housing within the UGB. And so that's the standard process. But again, there's really no process for, well, what if that land is already developed to substantially urban densities already, and really what you're doing is transferring areas that are considered urban under the statewide planning goals from outside the UGB into it's kind of the same problem. And then the last one is the boundary location problem, which is the standard process is, population forecast, you do the land need, you don't have enough, the city doesn't have enough land in the UGB, so they need to do a UGB amendment to include those lands to meet that need. So the standard process is then actually what you're doing is trying to identify lands that have buildable land to meet that land need that was identified. Again, there's no real process for, well, what if that land's already urban and significantly built out already, which doesn't, in most instances, I mean, I think there is some developable land potential in these areas, but it's not like, a vacant flat 200 acres kind of arrangement, right? It's like there's, I think some of the densities of these areas are north of 2 units to the acre already, which is a relatively urban density. And then the last economic problem the last problem really pertains to commercial development, because those areas are designated as in Charleston, Bardeview, and Millington, or Charleston, Bardeview, and Bunker Hill. The commercial areas in those areas are under what's called the unincorporated communities rule, which restricts the size, and Millington is a rural community under that rule, and it restricts the amount of commercial development that you're allowed to do. Essentially, you can't do new commercial developments in excess of 8,000 square feet of building in Charleston, Bardeview, and Bunker Hill, and then Millington, you're limited to 6,000 square feet, which if you have a lot of experience with commercial, like 6,000 square foot commercial building is not a very big deal. Industrial, there aren't those limitations. There are in the rule, but later the legislature decided we don't really like those limitations. So any land that was designated industrial originally can be as big as it wants. And that was something that the legislature passed. So those are the 4 basic problems. There's kind of 5 policy options that we presented to the planning commission. Chelsea already mentioned what their direction was, and really to sort of finish the project for consultants' work so that you guys can decide officially whether to go forward or not. We're asking for further direction from the board and the council because that's ultimately your guys' decision. So first one is to maintain the existing regulations. That's always an option, right? There's always the option, just do nothing. You know, it may not be working well, but we can, there's nothing that is requiring, there's not a state law that says, you know, the city of Coos Bay or Coos County has to do this, right? So there's always the option to do that. Sure. I think Jill has noted that the existing regulatory framework is sort of a little bit unwieldy in these areas, is less than ideal. So I think you could do it, but I don't think that's maybe the best option for the community, but you can do it. The other option is to do an RPS project only looking at the southwest side. The next option would be a UGB evaluation that is, and so the southwest side is Charleston, Charleston and Barview, and then also look just at the Bunker Hill Bay Park area. Those are the three areas that already have sewer, have water, and they're developed to substantially urban densities. The other option would be to do a UGB evaluation of all three of those areas, and all are a selection of the exception areas that are kind of near. Millington and Millington, Blossom Gulch, Libby, and then the RR2 area, which is kind of the exception land hill in the middle, smack in the middle of all three. And then the last option, which consultant recommended option, would be to include do an evaluation for UGB inclusion of the southwest side, the Bunker Hill Bay Park area, and then look at doing urban reserve for those exception areas in Libby, Blossom Gulch, and RR2. So these are the areas we're talking about. I think everybody in this firm is familiar, probably more familiar with me than I am, certainly more familiar than I am. The Southwest, like I said, those areas are both urban unincorporated communities. They're both served by Charleston Sanitary District and Charleston Fire District, and they're developed to urban intensities already. The next area is the Southeast area. So this is where you get into some choices. I think it's important to note that really the Southwest and the Southeast, as a policy matter, kind of functionally not connected to each other. The water board serves both areas, but there's two sewer treatment plants and different service districts. So essentially, they're not tied to each other in the way they might be in a lot of other communities. You make a choice about one and not do something with the other one. It doesn't really affect your overall system or planning. So this is the area where there really are the policy choices. So the first one would be just to include, or the piece to the north is the Bunker Hill Bay Park. That's the urban unincorporated community in that area. Millington is the rural community area, that's in red. And it's a rural community in part because it doesn't have sewer. So that's kind of the big cutoff between urban unincorporated community and rural community. Bunker Hill area is served by the Bunker Hill Sanitary District. Some areas are not in the fire district here. Others are within the Bunker Hill Fire District. And then the Isthmus Slough is in the Millington Fire District. And the Coal Bank Slough area is in the Livingston Fire District. So
Recording
here.
in
Oh,
progress.
looks like. Can you all hear us?
the land
Recording in
use
progress.
situation that would create more density that could be built. But it was probably suggested by Jay that that's not usually the way to go. My question is, if that was to be the case, you have to do the whole county, or can you just do a portion?
No, you could do.
Um, And usually why that's not done, or 8, or however many you could end up with.
I was just gonna ask too, if this means that we would zone, if we could zone southwest and southeast, because Coos County already has county city limits. Okay. Sunset City, right? That one, Sunset City outside of Hampton is in there, but not in city limits. So if you change something for Carlton, does that change all of?
No, not unless you wanted it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Joe would be paying attention to that. I mean, I didn't have him ask that.
Just making sure. Doesn't come up and